There is a subtle danger that few ever recognize, though it shapes the very foundation of our existence. It is not the threat of war or famine, nor the crumbling of empires, or the silence of forgotten ruins. It is something quieter, more intimate, yet infinitely more powerful: the quiet colonization of the mind. Warning: your thoughts are not your own is not a mere slogan to spark curiosity. It is a profound truth, a statement that stands at the crossroads of psychology, philosophy, and the hidden architecture of reality. To understand it is to begin unweaving the veil that has long cloaked humanity in illusion. At first glance, the idea seems almost absurd. After all, who could possibly claim ownership of your thoughts? They arise in your head, carried on the winds of your imagination, shaped by your memories, colored by your experiences. Surely, they are yours. Yet pause and listen more carefully. Notice how often a thought appears without invitation, as if whispered from some unseen corner of existence. Notice how your opinions bear the fingerprints of the society you were born into, the family that raised you, the media you consume, the culture that tells you what to value and what to despise. Your laughter echoes with inherited patterns. Your fears are sculpted by forces that existed long before you took your first breath. The voice that speaks within your mind, how much of it is truly your own, and how much is a carefully assembled chorus of influences. There is a deeper dimension to this warning. Human beings have long assumed that thought is a private kingdom, an inner sanctum where freedom reigns. But if we look closer, we see that thought itself is more like a river than a fortress. It flows through us, carrying with it sediments from the past, particles from the collective unconscious, currents shaped by language and myth. One may sit at the bank of this river and believe the water belongs to them, but the truth is that the water comes from far upstream, from sources hidden in mountains unseen. To believe your thoughts are entirely your own is to mistake the river's flow for personal creation, when in fact you are swimming in a current much older, much larger than yourself. This realization is unsettling, yet it carries with it both danger and opportunity. Danger, because when you assume ownership of thoughts that were never yours, you can be led astray, manipulated by unseen architects who know the levers of influence. Opportunity, because once you awaken to the truth, you may begin to see the architecture of thought itself, to discern which currents you wish to ride and which you will step away from. Imagine standing in a grand library that stretches endlessly in all directions, its shelves filled with books written not by one author, but by countless generations of voices. Every word you read influences the next word you will think. Every narrative becomes a seed, planted deep in the soil of your mind. Your thoughts are the harvest, but the seeds are not yours. They were sown by culture, by history, by systems, designed to shape you. Some seeds were planted with care, others with hidden agendas, yet all now grow within you as if they were natural. To awaken is to recognize the gardener's hand and to question the roots of the forest within your own skull. There is also a cosmic element at play. Ancient traditions and mystical schools across civilizations have long hinted at this truth, that thought is not confined to the individual, but part of a vast web of consciousness. In some traditions, thoughts are described as entities, living currents of energy that pass from one mind to another, like sparks leaping across a network. In others, thought is seen as an echo of universal intelligence, something borrowed rather than possessed. What you believe to be your own inner voice may, in this grander sense, be the resonance of an invisible symphony. Modern science, too, whispers its confirmation. Neuroscience reveals how susceptible the brain is to suggestion, how easily neural pathways adapt to repeated exposure, how mirror neurons synchronize us with the emotions and behaviors of others. Social psychology uncovers the terrifying ease with which humans conform to authority, to peers, to trends. Marketing, politics, religion, and even casual conversation, all of them weave themselves into your thought patterns, painting over the canvas of your mind until it is difficult to recall what was originally drawn there. The warning, then, is not simply that your thoughts are not your own, it is that, unless you awaken to this fact, you risk living an entire life in borrowed dreams, pursuing desires that were planted within you, defending beliefs that you never truly examined, fearing ghosts that were never yours to fear. It is to spend decades building a house on land that was never your own, only to realize at the end that you have been a tenant in your own mind. Yet this is not a message of despair. The warning is not meant to imprison you, but to liberate you. When you realize your thoughts are not your own, you stand at the threshold of true freedom. For only by recognizing the borrowed can you begin to seek the authentic. Only by seeing the architecture of influence can you decide which structures to dismantle and which to build anew. This awakening is not about rejecting all that flows into you, but about learning to discern. It is about becoming the conscious navigator of your inner river, rather than a passive passenger, swept away by currents you never chose. Think of it like a mirror, covered for years in dust, fingerprints, and smudges left by countless hands. You glance at it and see a distorted reflection, assuming it is you. But when you begin to clean the glass, when you begin to recognize what is yours and what is not you, start to see your true face emerge. The mirror has always been there, the reflection has always been waiting, but only now, with awareness, do you encounter the real. The phrase warning, "Your thoughts are not your own," is not a judgment. It is a lantern held up in the darkness, casting light on the shadows that have long shaped you unseen. It asks you to pause, to question, to look behind the veil. It asks you to reclaim the kingdom of thought, not by assuming it has always belonged to you, but by learning how to truly inhabit it. And so, with this introduction, we begin a journey not to reinforce the illusion of ownership, but to awaken to the truth of influence. Not to despair at the thought that your mind has been shaped, but to discover the extraordinary possibility that you can shape it anew. For when you realize that your thoughts are not your own, you stand at the very gateway of choice. The mind is not a solitary island. It is an intersection of countless streams that converge and diverge, some rushing with ferocity, others trickling quietly beneath the surface. When we confront the idea that our thoughts are not our own, we are forced to step into this confluence and ask, from where do these streams flow, and how deeply have they carved the channels of who we believe ourselves to be? At its essence, this realization rests upon several intertwined themes, patterns of influence that stretch from the intimate details of daily life to the vast unseen architectures of society and cosmos. One of the first pillars is the theme of conditioning. From the moment you drew your first breath, you were immersed in a field of influence. Parents spoke words into your ears, not merely to communicate, but to plant frames of meaning. The lullabies they sang were not chosen randomly. They carried with them the cultural rhythms of generations. The language itself, with its grammar, its idioms, its invisible rules, began shaping your mental scaffolding long before you could question it. By the time you learned to speak, the world had already spoken through you. And so, the thought patterns you now assume to be yours were seeded in soil prepared by others, soil cultivated over centuries. The second theme lies in the illusion of autonomy. Human beings love to imagine themselves as sovereign individuals, rulers of their own mental kingdoms. Yet the truth is closer to that of a dreamer who believes he controls the dream. Unaware of the forces that dictate its symbols and scenery, much of what we consider choice is heavily guided by structures that surround us. Consider how fashions rise and fall. Entire populations suddenly crave the same colors, the same objects, the same phrases, and yet each person declares, "I like this because it is my taste." Taste, however, is rarely born in solitude. It is transmitted, absorbed, replicated and echo, disguised as an original note. The illusion of autonomy masks a deeper orchestration. Another theme emerges. In the realm of collective thought, Carl Jung described it as the collective unconscious, a repository of symbols, archetypes, and primal stories that live not in one mind but in all. When you dream of falling, when you imagine heroes and villains, when you sense the power of fire or the mystery of the ocean, you are not inventing these associations anew. You are tapping into a well of meaning shared by humanity across cultures and eras. This collective pool of thought seeps into you, shaping not just your imagination, but also your sense of reality. The recognition that your thoughts are not yours alone reveals that you are part of an ongoing conversation spanning centuries, perhaps even millennia. Equally important is the theme of manipulation. The subtle architects of influence know well that if thoughts shape actions, then to control thought is to control destiny. Propaganda, advertising, political rhetoric, these are not accidental tools. They are carefully designed machinery for molding the currents of collective thought. When you buy what you don't need, when you fear what you cannot see, when you defend a belief without ever having examined it, you are standing in the shadow of manipulation. These external voices do not merely whisper, they script entire monologues. within your mind, and you speak them as though they were born from your own soul. Yet even deeper is the theme of resonance. Not all external influence is sinister. Some thoughts enter you like seeds of light, carrying wisdom and beauty. A poem read at the right moment can awaken something dormant within you. A melody can bring you to tears, unlocking emotions you never knew you carried. Teacher's words can ignite a fire that becomes your life's purpose. Resonance reminds us that the fact that our thoughts are not entirely our own is not solely a threat, it is also a gift. We are not closed systems, but open fields, capable of receiving inspiration from beyond the confines of our own experiences. To deny all influence would be to deny the possibility of shared wisdom. Underlying all these themes is the paradox of identity. If your thoughts are not your own, then who are you? The answer is both unsettling and liberating. You are not the sum total of borrowed thoughts, nor are you merely the passive vessel into which the world pours its stories. You are the awareness that notices them, the silent witness who can decide whether to claim them or let them pass. Thoughts may not originate within you, but consciousness, the capacity to notice, to choose, to direct, belongs uniquely to you. The danger is in forgetting this distinction. The freedom is in remembering it. Seen from a cosmic perspective, this recognition transforms into something even grander. Perhaps the human mind was never designed to be a closed loop. Perhaps it was meant to be a channel, a receiver, a translator of patterns that ripple through the universe. If thought flows through us rather than from us, then we are not prisoners of borrowed ideas, but participants in a larger symphony. Each individual mind becomes like an instrument, capable of harmonizing with the greater whole, or falling into discord when unconscious of its tuning. The phrase, "your thoughts are not your own," thus becomes less a warning of theft, and more an invitation to consciously choose what music you will allow to play through you. These core themes, conditioning, the illusion of autonomy, collective thought, manipulation, resonance, and identity, form the pillars of the warning. They reveal that while thought may not arise entirely from you, you hold the power to discern, to question, to attune. They remind you that you are not alone in the architecture of the mind, but you are also not powerless within it. The deeper truths are not meant to strip you of hope, but to awaken you from slumber. To know your thoughts are not your own is not to despair, it is to become aware of the rivers that flow within you, and to learn how to step into the current with choice rather than blindness. To grasp the idea that your thoughts are not your own, it helps to wander into the realm of story, where metaphor paints truths more vividly than argument. Symbols are the language of the unconscious, and through them we can glimpse dimensions of meaning that ordinary words fail to convey. It is here, in allegory, that the hidden architecture of influence becomes clearer, and the warning takes on flesh and shadow. Imagine first the tale of a vast marketplace, endless in size, where every stall offers not fruits or fabrics, but thoughts. Vendors cry out to you with dazzling slogans. Some shout of fear, "Beware, or you will perish." Others whisper promises of pleasure, "Buy this, and you will be loved." Still others cloak themselves in righteousness. "Adopt this belief, and you will be good." You walk through this market every day, filling your basket without even noticing. You choose some thoughts deliberately, perhaps, but many slip into your basket while you are distracted. And so, you return home each night carrying armfuls of voices that will echo within your mind as if they were your own. The tragedy is that most people never realize they are shopping. They assume the contents of their baskets sprang from within, forgetting that they were chosen for them long before they entered the marketplace. Consider next the image of a great theater. Upon its stage, countless actors perform an endless play. Some represent the voices of your ancestors, others the dictates of religion, still others the drumbeat of media and politics. You sit in the audience, watching with rapt attention, believing the story unfolding before you is your story. You laugh when the actors tell you to laugh. You weep when the script calls for tears. The play is convincing, so convincing that you forget it is a play. But behind the curtains, hidden stagehands pull ropes and whisper cues, ensuring that the drama continues as written. The awakening comes when you realize you are not merely an audience member. You are the stage itself, and the actors are only borrowing your space. Another symbol emerges in the form of a mirror maze. You walk through it, seeing reflections of yourself at every turn. Some are distorted, tall, short, twisted, fragmented. You grow confused, trying to decide which reflection is the real you. One whispers that you must strive harder to succeed. Another insists you are not enough. Another reassures you with false comfort. You chase these reflections as though they are truth, forgetting that the mirrors are not of your design. They were constructed by others, positioned to shape your perception. The danger lies not in the mirrors themselves, but in mistaking their distortions for reality. To awaken here is to recognize that you are not the reflection at Arliwa, the one walking through the maze, capable of stepping beyond it. There is also the parable of the borrowed garment. A child grows up wearing clothes handed down from older siblings. Each shirt, each pair of shoes, each jacket was chosen for another, yet the child wears them until they feel like his own. Over time, he forgets that they were never designed with him in mind. So too with thought. We wear ideas passed down from family, culture, and society until they cling to us like second skin. We say, "This is who I am," not realizing we are clothed in borrowed fabric. Freedom comes not from stripping naked of all influence, but from choosing consciously which garments truly fit, and which must be laid aside. Perhaps the most haunting image is that of a grand puppet hole. Thousands of marionettes dance in perfect synchronization, each believing itself free. Their strings are invisible, woven of suggestion, fear, and desire. When one puppet defends its opinion with fiery conviction, it does not realize the conviction itself was planted. When another despises its neighbor, it believes the hatred genuine, unaware that its string was tugged by hidden hands. Yet there is one difference between puppets of wood and puppets of flesh. The human marionette can awaken to the strings. In that awakening lies the possibility of cutting them. These narratives are not merely fanciful. They are symbols of how thought truly functions. The marketplace is the media, the endless river of advertisements, news cycles, and digital chatter. The theater is the cultural narrative, scripted long before we entered the stage. The mirror maze is the feedback loop of comparison, built by social structures that tell us who we should be. The borrowed garment is tradition, both beautiful and suffocating. The puppet hole is the machinery of power, manipulating belief to control behavior. In each image, the warning is clear. What you call your thought is often a reflection, a hand-me-down, a string pulled from elsewhere. Yet, within these symbols lies not only a warning but also a promise. The market is overwhelming, but one can learn to choose deliberately, to recognize the difference between a poisoned fruit and nourishing bread. The theater may seem predetermined, but one can step backstage, take hold of the script, and begin to write new lines. The mirror maze is confusing, but one can remember the truth that the mirrors only distort, and the self is beyond reflection. The borrowed garment can be removed, allowing space for one's own design. The puppet can wake, feel the strings, and begin to sever them. The symbolic narratives point us toward one truth. The battle for sovereignty of thought is not external but internal. The world will always offer its voices, its garments, its mirrors, its strings. What matters is whether you sleep through the performance or awaken to your role as participant, chooser, and creator. Awareness without integration is like awakening from a dream, only to fall back into another, subtler sleep. To recognize that your thoughts are not your own is the first step. But what does one do with this recognition? How can this cosmic truth unfold into something practical, something that touches the fabric of daily life? It is here that the grand symbolism collapses into the ordinary moments of waking up, eating breakfast, conversing with strangers, and making choices that ripple outward into the shape of our lives. The first integration begins with observation. Imagine standing at the bank of that river of thought, noticing the currents without immediately plunging in. When a thought arises, "I am not good enough," or "I must have this to be happy," pause before claiming it. Ask, from where did this come? Whose voice is this? Is it the echo of a parent's warning, a teacher's criticism, an advertisement's lure, or a culture's expectation? This act of questioning transforms thought from dictator to suggestion. It allows you to step out of the role of automatic consumer and into that of discerning witness. Each moment of observation loosens the grip of borrowed narratives. Integration also means reclaiming choice. Consider how easily one reaches for the phone in the morning, scrolling through headlines or images, allowing external currents to dictate the day's emotional tone. To break this pattern is not about rejecting technology, but about recognizing its influence and consciously deciding how to engage. Instead of drifting into the tide, you can choose silence, reflection, or words of your own making to shape the morning. In doing so, you reclaim the sovereignty of your first thoughts, setting the stage for a day not entirely hijacked by borrowed noise. In the realm of relationships, the implications grow even more profound. Much of the conflict between people is not truly between individuals, but between the inherited ideas they carry. When two people argue about politics, religion, or morality, often they are merely voicing scripts written long before they met, scripts fed to them by larger systems. To realize this is to dissolve some of the heat of conflict, replacing it with curiosity. If my thought is not fully mine, and yours is not fully yours, then perhaps we are not enemies, but fellow travelers caught in different currents. This recognition births compassion. It allows dialogue to replace hostility, understanding to replace the illusion of opposition. In work and ambition, too, the warning carries weight. Many spend their lives pursuing goals they never chose, chasing success as defined by invisible hands, toil for status, wealth, or recognition, believing these to be authentic desires, when often they are cultural scripts, whispering, "This is what matters." To pause and ask, "Do I truly want this? Or was I told to want this?" can alter the entire trajectory of a life. It may lead some to continue along the same path, but with greater clarity. It may lead others to abandon borrowed ambitions and seek work that resonates with their own silent truth. Either way, the act of questioning becomes the seed of authenticity. There are also implications for health, for the body is not exempt from borrowed thoughts. Consider the constant barrage of messages about beauty, fitness, diet, and worth. These external standards seep into the mind until one looks in the mirror and sees not a body, but a battlefield of comparisons. To recognize these as borrowed allows one to step away from the tyranny of ideals that were never theirs. Health then becomes not the pursuit of an external image, but the cultivation of genuine well-being, guided by one's own rhythm rather than the drumbeat of societal demand. The collective implications are vast. If entire populations operate under the illusion that their thoughts are their own, they can be led into wars, manipulated into fear, consumed by consumerism, enslaved by ideologies. But if even a fraction awaken to the truth, the architecture of control begins to crack. Systems built on unexamined thought require unconscious participation. Withdraw that, and the systems weaken. To awaken individually, then, is not merely personal, it is an act of collective transformation. Each person who steps out of the puppet hole changes the rhythm of the dance, and over time, the strings of manipulation lose their power. Integration also requires humility. One must accept that no matter how vigilant, one can never be entirely free of influence. To live in the world is to be shaped by it. The goal is not perfect isolation, but conscious engagement. Just as the body cannot avoid breathing the air, but can choose where to breathe and how deeply, so too the mind cannot avoid influence, but can choose which voices to invite inward. Humility softens the edges of awakening, reminding us that influence is not inherently evil. It is the unconsciousness of it that imprisons us. Finally, integration calls for creation. If your thoughts are not your own, then what will you create? That is yours. Will you merely recycle the voices of others, or will you allow awareness to transform influence into originality? A musician hears melodies from the past, but composes anew. A poet reads countless verses but distills them into a unique expression. So too can you take the currents of thought flowing through you and redirect them into something that reflects your awareness, your witness, your consciousness. In this act of creation lies the greatest antidote to borrowed existence. The practical implications of this truth are both subtle and immense. They ask you to pause before acting, to discern before claiming, to choose before following. They ask you to see your own life, not as a script written by unseen authors, but as a stage upon which you may improvise, rewrite, and ultimately discover a voice that, though born from countless influences, sings in a tone unmistakably your own. There comes a moment in every journey of awakening when the abstract truths and symbolic insights converge into a singular revelation, not as an intellectual idea, but as a lived recognition. You are not the thoughts you think. They are visitors, guests in the house of your awareness. Some come bearing gifts of wisdom, others bring burdens of fear, and many arrive uninvited, lingering in the corridors of your mind. Yet the house itself, the space in which these thoughts arise, is yours, and it is vast beyond measure. The warning that your thoughts are not your own is not meant to terrify you, but to call you back to the mastery of this house, to the realization that though you cannot control which guests arrive, you can decide who stays. If you carry only one message from this exploration, let it be this: sovereignty begins with recognition. You are not free because you have no influences. You are free because you learn to see the influences clearly. Just as a sailor does not curse the wind but learns to work with it, so too can you learn to navigate the currents of thought. Awareness becomes your compass, choice your rudder, and intention the sails that catch the winds of inspiration while letting the storms pass. This truth reshapes the very notion of identity. Who are you, if not the thoughts you repeat? You are the silence beneath them. You are the field in which they rise and fall. You are the presence that notices when anger surges, when desire whispers, when doubt claws at the edges of your resolve. And in that noticing, you reclaim power. The voices may still clamor, the borrowed garments may still cling, the strings may still tug, but the awareness of them is the beginning of freedom. To live with this awareness is to walk differently through the world. You hear a headline, but you no longer absorb it unquestioned. You encounter a cultural expectation, but you pause before bowing to it. You feel the pull of fear, but you ask, is this mine, or was it planted? Slowly, the automatic machinery of borrowed thought loses its grip. Slowly, you begin to speak in your own voice, not the echo of 1,000 others. This does not mean you reject influence altogether. It means you choose with discernment. You become like a gardener, selecting which seeds to cultivate in the soil of your mind. And then something miraculous occurs. When enough people awaken to this truth, the collective itself begins to shift. The theater no longer dictates every emotion. The marketplace of thought loses some of its hypnotic power. The puppet hole grows quieter as strings are cut, one by one. A new kind of humanity emerges, not one that is free of influence, but one that is conscious of it, awake within it, creative in response to it. In this vision, societies no longer move blindly according to manipulation, but consciously toward shared growth and wisdom. The individual awakening ripples outward, transforming the collective. Yet none of this can happen without the first step: recognition. The warning must be heard, not as an accusation, but as an invitation. It is not meant to strip you of certainty, but to lead you into deeper truth. It is not meant to make you distrust every thought, but to teach you to observe them with clarity. And once you truly see that your thoughts are not your own, you will never again mistake the echo for the origin, the string for the self, the borrowed garment for your true skin. The call then is simple, though its practice is lifelong. Become the witness of your thoughts. Question them, trace their origins, and choose consciously which to embrace. Create from awareness rather than compulsion. And above all, remember, you are not the marketplace, the theater, the mirrors, or the strings. You are the vastness in which they all appear. This is the transformation that awaits when the warning is heeded. It is not a transformation into something new, but a return to what has always been truth. That you are not your thoughts, but the luminous awareness behind them. That awareness is sovereign, untouched by manipulation, unbound by conditioning, infinite in its freedom. Step into it. Let this truth ignite the courage to live differently. Let it guide you through the noise of the world, through the endless tides of influence, back to the still center of your being. For once you awaken to the fact that your thoughts are not your own, you hold the power to finally claim what is: your awareness, your presence, your choice, your life.